Hello everyone, welcome to a new Let's Talk Criterion, and a special hello to all my new subscribers who've joined me in the last few weeks. Really pleased to have you all on board, and as you can see, your names are now scrolling along the bottom of the screen as I speak. I'm so glad you're all enjoying my content on the channel. So this is 5 Criterions I think you should see. Now, this is not my 5 favourite Criterion releases in my collection. To be honest, I can't choose 5. There are far too many that I like too much and I would class as favourites. It's just 5 of my Criterion releases that I think you should take a look at. Now, the other thing to note is the films aren't ranked. It's not a top 5. So we start with number 1, Broadcast News. Now I have to admit this is one of my favourite comedies. It was directed by James L. Brooks and released in 1987. I went to the Odeon Cinema in Colchester to see this, and I'm very glad that I did make that journey. The trio that takes star billing is what makes the film really work. Holly Hunter is a supervising editor who works in a Washington news bureau. William Hurt is a local newscaster who comes to learn more and to train as a reporter and move up in the political capital. And Albert Brooks is a cynical reporter already at the bureau who wants more in his career but really doesn't ingratiate himself well with the upper hierarchy who can progress his career further. The film starts with a brilliant montage showing the characters as teenagers, and you're no doubt whatsoever why they become the people they are when you eventually see them as adults. James L. Brooks did work on television in the 70s, including The Mary Tyler Moore Show, Rhoda and Taxi. His film work speaks for itself though. Starting over in 1979, the Oscar-winning Terms of Endearment in 1983, and then Broadcast News in 1987. Anchor is played by Jack Nicholson, a very clever cameo by Brooks in the picture, and young Joan Cusack is fresh from her success in Working Girl as the news production assistant. There's a great scene where she has to get a news piece edited in time for the inclusion live on the network news, and she is panicking the whole time. It's my favourite part of the film. Now, the movie itself was nominated for 7 Academy Awards, but unfortunately it didn't win a single one. And I think that's because it was a lightweight comedy and largely ignored by the Academy that year. I also like the musical score for the film by Bill Conti, and it's a score which remains one of my favourites, suiting the film's tone perfectly. Broadcast News is a simple film with a romantic love triangle and comedy mixed with pathos. It's great comic direction by James L. Brooks, and the Criterion Blu-ray is available in the US, and it has the best edition of the film certainly, and unseen outtakes, as well as behind the scenes on the set of the news bureau with the director. It's a great film and one I thoroughly recommend as a Hollywood comedy. I was delighted to see on the extras some deleted scenes, including one that had never seen the light of day before, and it was a real eye-opener for me. I do know why it was cut though, as it would have changed the pace of the whole movie. But I really appreciate it being included on the Criterion Blu-ray as an extra. Broadcast News is spine number 552. Now we change the tone completely now with my second choice, Straw Dogs, directed by Sam Peckinpah. This director had established himself firmly as a director who, like Tarantino, loved a bloodbath in his films, and The Wild Bunch was his classic western, but later in his career he brought us Cross of Iron and Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia. In 1971 he changed his approach entirely with Straw Dogs. It was totally shot in Britain, in the rural village of Wakeley in Cornwall. Susan George plays Amy Sumner, who was brought up in the village, and she brings her new husband, David Sumner, played by Dustin Hoffman, there for a holiday. He's an American and he struggles somewhat to fit in with the locals, who are fairly insular and very hostile towards him. He's a mathematician and a bookworm type, and it's soon singled out for unwanted attention by Amy's ex-boyfriend, Charlie Venner, along with his cronies played by Norman Scott, Chris Causey and Phil Ridgway, who immediately resent that the meek outsider has married one of their own. They break in and attempt to rape her and brutalise David in the process, and he has to come to her defence. Now, this film is not an easy watch, but it's now a classic as it shows intimidation and brutalisation and a strong case of xenophobia. There's an animalistic quality to the extended rape scene, and it's shot with very little compromise from its director. The film also came in for a lot of censorship attention on its release, and it was in fact banned from some UK theatres. The work's held in considerable respect though by critics and filmmakers alike. There was a 2011 remake by Don Lurie, but that's best forgotten. The cover art is quite austere, as you can see now, with the smashed glasses and the Blu-ray, which contains some interesting features, including an audio commentary from 2003 by Stephen Prince, author of Savage Cinema, Sam Peckinpah and the Rise of Ultra-Violent Movies. Man Traps, Straw Dogs, The Final Cut, a 2003 documentary about the making of the film. Sam Peckinpah, Man of Iron, a 1993 documentary. So, Straw Dogs is currently available in the US, and it's spine number 182. Hello there, James. Jim Jam Movies on YouTube. I hope you enjoy this one. It's number 3. It started its life as a concept album released in 1973 by British band The Who. It was the brainchild of Pete Townsend. The story, it centres on a young working class mod called Jimmy. He likes drugs, beach fights and romance, and he becomes a fan of The Who after a concert in Brighton. He clashes with his parents over his usage of amphetamines and has difficulty finding regular work and doubts his own self-worth, quitting a job as a dustman after only 2 days. For Quadrophenia director Frank Rodham, he chose up-and-coming actor Phil Daniels after his appearance in Scum to play Jimmy Cooper, the young mod. The film would not be complete without the amazing Who soundtrack, which they re-recorded for the film's release in 1979. There are some other British stars of the time, including Leslie Ice, Phil Davis and Ray Winston, also from Scum, and the singer Sting, who was successful in the rock band The Police at the time, playing Ace Face, a bellboy at the Grand Hotel Brighton. Female singer Toya Wilcox also appears, as well as popular actor Michael Elphick. Overall a great British cast there, I think you'll agree. The climactic fight sequence shot around the town is an iconic scene, but apparently the locals in the town weren't best pleased when the young and excitable cast descended on the seaside town to film. I've had fish and chips in the actual cafe they used for part of that filming. The film is a great example of British filmmaking at its best, something only we can do well, up there with films like The Long Good Friday, Rita Sue and Bob 2, Mona Lisa and Sid and Nancy. The extras of the disc are quite impressive, and there's a reason to get the Criterion version of the film if you can. No other release will quite match up to that. There's a new audio commentary featuring the director Frank Rodham and Tofano. New interview with Bill Kirpishley, the film's co-producer and The Who's co-manager. New interview with The Who's sound engineer Bob Pryden, featuring a discussion of the new mix as well as a restoration demonstration. Well, we're seeing that one. Segment on the film from a 1979 episode of the BBC TV series Talking Pictures, featuring interviews and on-set footage. Segment from a 1964 episode of the French news programme 7 Jours du Monde about mods and rockers. 6 millions de jeunes mods, a 1965 episode of the French youth culture programme featuring early footage of The Who. Now the standout songs include 515, I've Had Enough, and my personal favourite, Love Reign Over Me from Roger Daltrey. Great vocal performance there. Quadrophenia is a great slice of British mods and rockers 60s subculture and is spine number 624. So number 4 on my list is a Terrence Malick film. No surprise there, it's The Thin Red Line. It depicts a fictionalised version of the Battle of Mount Austin, which was part of the Guadalcanal campaign in the Pacific Theatre of World War II. The soldiers of C Company, 1st Battalion, 27th Infantry Regiment, 25th Infantry Division, are working their way through the jungle to link up with the rest of their division. Nothing new in the plot here, but Malick puts his audience in the centre of it, with the small troop, and you've experienced things from their perspective. It's a voyage of discovery as the fairly naive soldiers uncover the real horrors of war as they make their journey, taking serious casualties along the way. Now, what impressed me most about this was the surround mix, where if you close your eyes, you can hear the individual blades of grass moving in the breeze. a complete contrast to later, where there's a major confrontation where it's flat out with the enemy and the surrounds really go active. Very exciting and very immersive. The cast is also very impressive. It features Adrian Brody, George Clooney, John Cusack, Woody Harrelson, Jared Leto, Jim Caviezel, Nick Nolte, Elias Koteas, Ben Chaplin, there's more, John C. Reilly and John Travolta. There's a great music score by the one and only Hans Zimmer, and I personally think for me it tops Saving Private Ryan. It's got a better emotional centre to it, and to some degree you're distanced from the characters in it, so you don't get too attached to them. Not as much manipulation emotionally as Spielberg usually delivers. Now, by the final cut, footage of performances by Bill Pullman, Lucas Haas and Mickey Rourke unfortunately had been removed. One of Rourke's scenes, however, is included in the special features outtakes of this Criterion Blu-ray. And it's interesting to watch, but you can see why the performances were cut from the film. Now, I would thoroughly recommend The Thin Red Line. It's not released in the UK yet on Criterion. It's a shame because we've quite a lot of Malick titles in the UK collection now, but this is not in there yet. But it's available on import. And I include all the current Amazon UK import links in the description of my 5 film choices. So finally, I have to include a classic, and for me it's the definitive Titanic film, A Night to Remember. See this film. It will put across the Titanic story properly for you. Cameron couldn't settle for just sinking the ship. He had to put a romance in there as well. A Night to Remember is superior to his film because it tells the build-up and it shows the passengers perish, and there is no good ending to this story, but for its time it's brilliantly done. Directed by Roy Ward Baker in 1958, it stars Kenneth More as Second Officer Charles Herbert Lightoller. Now, it's based on the book by Walter Lord, and the film and the book recount the final night of RMS Titanic on its maiden voyage from Southampton to New York, where it struck an iceberg in the North Atlantic Ocean and sank in the early morning hours of Monday the 15th of April 1912. The story is well known, so I won't go into the actual plot of the film, but talk about the production itself. It's quite a departure for its director, as there was no CGI in 1958, so he used a combination of maths and models to recreate the sinking of the great ship. There was an enormous cast of extras used to make up the passengers and crew of the ocean liner during its fateful maiden voyage. The filmmakers achieved nuanced performances and authentic atmosphere by consulting several actual Titanic survivors who served as technical advisors on the film. Among them were Fourth Officer Joseph Boxall and passengers Edith Russell and Lawrence Beasley. One day, during shooting, Beasley famously gate-crashed the set. He infiltrated the set during the sinking scene, hoping to go down with the ship, but was discovered by the director, who ordered him off the set and vetoed his unscheduled appearance due to actors' union rules. Thus, as Julian Barnes puts it in a comment he made, for the second time in his life, Beasley left the Titanic just before it was due to go down. I find that really amusing. They didn't have a tank big enough at Pinewood to film those scenes of the ship sinking, so that sequence was done in an open-air swimming bath at Ruislip Lido at 2 a.m. on an icy November morning. Unlike Cameron's film, they didn't build a scale-sized replica. Their budget only stretched to indoor set pieces, but they still managed to produce a believable reconstruction of the sinking to delight and entertain cinema audiences, and did brilliant box office in the UK that year. It underperformed in the US, however. A Night to Remember does have some historical inaccuracies in it. Like survivor Stanley Lord, he was very upset by his negative portrayal by the actor Russell Napier, which depicted him in his warm cabin in his pyjamas in bed when the ship sank. But in fact, he was actually sleeping in the chart room at the time with his uniform on. Also, the first scene of A Night to Remember depicts the christening of the ship at its launch. However, the Titanic was never christened, as it was not the practice of the White Star Line to stand on this sort of ceremony, and this has come down in popular lore as one of the many contributing factors to the ship's bad luck. This is a great Criterion release with an informative booklet, which you can see on the screen now, as well as some interesting extras. including an audio commentary by Don Lynch and Ken Marshall, author and illustrator of Titanic and Illustrated History. The Making of a Night to Remember from 1993, a 60-minute documentary featuring producer William McQuitty's rare behind-the-scenes footage. Archival interview with Titanic survivor Eva Hart. A 1962 half-hour Swedish documentary featuring interviews with the Titanic survivors. The Iceberg That Sank the Titanic, a 2006 60-minute BBC documentary. So I do hope you'll find one, if not more than one of those films, certainly worth taking a look at. In the next Let's Talk Criterion, it's back to the new releases, and we go to July, including Mirror by Andrei Tarkovsky, Bringing Up Baby with Cary Grant and Katharine Hepburn, as well as others scheduled for UK and US release in July. Until then, enjoy the super summer sunshine, and above all, keep watching those movies.